Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Ravi Nahar, and I'm the founder of Decoded. We are doing a series of webinars where we will explore the different khandas of the Valmiki Ramayana, and in each webinar or presentation, I will discuss the spiritual, the astral spiritual science, and the practical applications of the various different characters, the various khandas or chapters, and how they relate to us internally. So previously, we looked at the Balakhand, and we discussed the spiritual science of Dasarath. Dasarath is the king of Kushal, and he controls his kingdom from his capital, Ayodhya. Now, when you take the name Dasarath and you break that Sanskrit word down, it actually means the 10 senses, which are connected to your central nervous system, so your brain, which is represented by what Bhagwan Valmiki had described within the Valmiki Ramayana as Kushal. So Kushal represents the central nervous system, as in your brain, and thus it represents the 10 senses, which come under the influence of manas, or the blind sense mind. Today, we are going to look at the Ayodhya Khand and the reasons for why Dasarath had to honor Kaikeyi, one of his 3 wives. So he had 3 queens or 3 wives, and one of his wives, known as Kaikeyi, she had requested that he honors the 2 boons which he had given her during a battle with the demons in the Dandaka forest. But what we're going to do today is look at the spiritual science, and also the practical applications. So I'm going to switch off my video now, and what I'm going to do is start off with the very first presentation which we did about a month ago, which is on the first shlok and how all of this relates to the first shlok. So that is the first shlok, which we explored about a month ago. And what we did was we looked at the practical applications of how this would relate to our lives in modern day or modern times. But there was more of a heavy focus on the spiritual science behind it, and how actually the shlok, even though it came across as a curse, was actually the glorification of Ram and the Ramayana. And you can go back and watch that video on our YouTube channel. But today, we will be focusing on Ayodhya Khand and the reason for Rama's exile at the spiritual and practical level, and what that means for your destiny and your karma. So Dasarath's 3 queens. King Dasarath, who represents the 10 senses, controlled a kingdom in the north of India known as Kushal. And he controlled his kingdom from a place called Ayodhya. Ayodhya was the capital, and he had 3 queens. The 3 queens were Kaikeyi, Sumitra, and Kushalya. So before we look at the spiritual and the practical applications of the 3 queens and the reason for Rama's exile, let's explore how we decode scriptures. And scriptures can be decoded, some will say, on different levels of interpretation. But strictly speaking, there are only 3 levels of interpretation, which are known as the Adhipatik. So this is the story of the Ramayana, the character symbology, the series of events, how those characters interacting with one another. It is based on metaphors and similes, and is written by Bhagwan Valmiki Ji as a poem in the language that we call Sanskrit, the language of the gods, which is really not really a language that you can converse in, but very advanced spiritual formulas. Underneath that is the process of science. is the astral signs, which we call the Adidevic. When you come to this level of interpretation, I want to use the first Brahma Sutra, Atha Ato Brahma Jishnasa, which means that now it is a desire for spiritual knowledge. Underneath the astral science or the spiritual science is the Adhyatmic level of interpretation, which is the actual disciplined practice of these advanced Kriya Yogic techniques, which help you to become more balanced in life, which help you to understand your purpose or your dharma in life. So they help you with the practical applications, but also, more importantly, it also helps you on your spiritual journey as well, in terms of self-realization. So the first 6 khandas, or the first 6 chapters, which Bhagwan Valmiki wrote, which is the journey of Ram, is actually the whole entire science of self-realization. And if when practiced at the Atmic level of interpretation, it is what can allow your soul to attain samadhi or enlightenment. So let's look at the spiritual interpretation of Dasara's 3 queens. Now, the Vedas say that there are 72 million different types of energies which construct the universes. We have yet to discover those 72 million different types of energies. However, as we ascend through the Dwapara Yuga, the Yuga of electrical energies or subtle energies and different types of electricities, science as a global community is discovering other parts within the structure of the universe that we did not know about, even up to about 2 decades ago, 20 years ago. But science has leaped in massively over the last kind of 2 or 3 decades. So when we look at Dasara's 3 queens from a spiritual point of view, they actually represent the 3 main nadis of the astral body, of your body of intelligent light and sound energy. The Vedas say there are 72,000 different types of nadis which connect to your physical body. So just as your physical body has a brain and has a spine, so your astral body of light and sound energy has an astral brain and an astral spine. Now, what connects the astral body to the astral body to the physical body are these nadis, streams of energy. And out of those, Kushalya, Kekai, and Sumitra are the most important. They are the 3 main nadis. So over here, we have this very simple diagram, which shows the blue here representing Kekai, the Pingala Nadi, Sumitra representing the Ida Nadi, and Kushalya representing this part here in the middle, known as the Shushamana. And through the Shushamana, the Kundalini Shakti, or Sitama, rises up through the Brahmanadi and into the brain, where one will experience enlightenment when that happens through the practice of these Kriya Yogic techniques. But from a practical point of view, the Kai also represents what we call the sympathetic system of the peripheral nervous system. And Sumitra represents the parasympathetic system of the peripheral nervous system. I don't want you to focus too much on the science. I will explain it as a simple term as I possibly can. But what we're going to do today is focus on Kekai, who represents the sympathetic part of the peripheral nervous system. And when I say peripheral nervous system, what I mean is the spine. So the 3 queens represent the spine. The Para Siya Nadi Mandalam. Along the spine, we have different centers of consciousness or different chakras, and the 72,000 different nadis will connect into these different centers of consciousness, which enliven your physical body through prana. At the top, we have Ayodhya, which we call Mukti Trivini or the Rama Darbar. We call this Mukti Trivini because Mukti means liberation and Trivini means 3 rivers. The 3 queens connect here together, and when they connect here together and you can move your Kundalini upwards, Through the Shushamna, with the Brahmanadi or the Brahmanadi, then you have Samadhi or enlightenment. At the bottom is Yukta Dravini, which is where Lanka sits, which is where most of our consciousness sits. But we're going to focus on the sympathetic system of the spine or Gagai, but also on mantra. And if you know the story of the Ramayana, you will know that mantra was the maid to Queen Gagai, whom she had brought along with her from her maternal home. So let's look at the practical applications, and what I will do is I'll dip in and out of the spiritual application, but I want to focus more on the practical application of Queen Gagai in Rama's exile. So firstly, let's start defining what we mean by these Sanskrit terms. And I don't want you to think of these Sanskrit terms as being words which you converse in, but more as spiritual formulas. And we're going to break those down and apply it at a practical level. So when I say Ayodhya, what we mean by Ayodhya is balance. So in Sanskrit, when you put an A in front of any word, it means the opposite of what it would mean if the A was not there. So Yodhya comes from the Sanskrit root Yud. Just like in the Mahabharata, there was Duryodhan. Duryodhan was someone of great conflict, and he was the main instigator of the war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Ayodhya, in the context of the Valmiki Ramayana, means balance. It means tranquility. It means a place where everything is in synchronization. And that is what King Dasratha's kingdom was like. It was a place of tranquility. It was a place of balance. It was a place of gratitude and contentment. The people of his kingdom were happy. They were successful. There was no greed. There was no backstabbing. They were in complete equilibrium. Gagai represents the sympathetic system, which activates what we call the primitive system of our physical body. So Gagai represents the Pingala Nadi. And when Gagai becomes activated, she activates instantly this primitive system known as the fight, flight, or free system. The free system is actually more representative of Sumitra. There's a lot of research happening within the peripheral nervous system and whether the fight or flight is actually part of the sympathetic or the parasympathetic. But from what we know from our current science is that Gagai would represent the sympathetic system, the primitive system of flight or fight. So why does this system come into activation? Well, the human body or any animal is constructed by the universe in such a way that it is ready for survival. So what happens is that when you are in danger, say for example, you are being chased by a predator, your subconscious mind, your primitive system will instantly click in. And when it clicks in, it overtakes your actions. You're no longer in conscious control because what it wants to do is help you survive and continue with life. So say, for example, there's a lion or a tiger which is about to eat a gazelle. As soon as the gazelle or the zebra notices that their life is in danger, their primitive system, their stress response will kick in, and that particular animal will then run away to safety. It will run away to safety and continue doing what it was doing before. However, everything changes within the human being. In the story of the Ramayana, Gagai, the queen of King Dasratha, she was influenced by her thoughts. And she was influenced by her thoughts, which were being instigated by her maid, Mantra. Mantra means the wavering mind. And this wavering mind actually sits at the bottom of the spine. So we looked at the chakras, the centers of consciousness in the previous slides. You will know there are 6 chakras, not 7. The Sahasrara is not a chakra. It is the dynamo through which prana flows into. There are 6 chakras. The 3 at the bottom are the Muladhara, the Savasthadan, and the Manipur. When your consciousness sits at the bottom of your spine, it's all about basic survival. It's about instinct. It's about likes and desires. It's about emotions. It's about feelings. When you develop spiritually and your consciousness expands, your Kundalini Shakti will slowly start going beyond the Manipur chakra and into the higher centers of consciousness. So now your consciousness sits at a more spiritual level, the Anahata, the Vishuddhi, and the Agna chakra. In the Valmiki Ramayana, in Canto 7, Mantra, a hunchback, the hereditary maidservant of Queen Kagai, who had accidentally ascended the roof of the palace. Focus on the word accidentally ascended. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read from the Ramayana, Ayodhya Khand, Canto 7. Van Valmiki wrote, Mantra, a hunchback, hereditary maidservant of Queen Kagai, who had accidentally ascended the roof of the palace, inquires of Shri Ram's earthwell nurse, the occasion for the festivities, and on being told of Shri Ram's forthcoming installation, feels enraged, and approaching Kagai, instigates her to stop the installation. Kagai, on the other hand, feels rejoiced over the joys and gifts of her, a jewel as a token of pleasure. So Mantra has come to Kagai and has said to her that you need to be worried that Ram, your stepson, the eldest son of King Decoded, is about to be made Prince Regent of Ayodhya and will eventually become the king. What does this mean for your son, Bharat? Bharat is now going to be left as a second-class citizen, and he will be under the foot of Ram, and he will not be given what is rightfully his. Van Valmiki continues within this canto by saying, a maidservant Kagai of unknown birth had actually lived with her ever since she came to Ayodhya. Ascending by chance, the roof of her palace was shone like the moon. From that palace, Mantra, as the maidservant was called, looked around the whole of Ayodhya, whose main road had been watered, which had been strewn with lotus and lilies. It had been fully decorated with costly buntings and flags, and sprinkled with sandal water, and was crowded with men that had gone through a ceremonial bath. Now, what Mantra is doing here in the Ayodhya Khand in Canto 7 is that Mantra represents your thoughts, your wavering mind. And what she's doing is that she's accidentally ascending up the spine through the peripheral nervous system and activating Kagai, which is the sympathetic system, the primitive system of fight or flight, which helps you to survive. But what happens in human beings is that because our neocortex, our human part of the brain, is the largest part with 40%, when that comes under the influence of manas, the blind sense mind, and negative thoughts, emotions, feelings, and desires, we find it difficult to come out of this fight or flight system. So human beings, simply by the power of their thoughts, are able to go into the primitive system of fight or flight. And what happens when you are unable to come out of this system is that the stress response does not switch off, and that is when stress, anxiety, depressions happen. That is when suicide happens. That is when people feeling bad or having low feelings happens. You see, in the story of the Ramayana, Bhagwan Valmiki says, she said, get up, O deluded one, referring to the Kagai. You do not perceive yourself threatened by a flood of misery. So even though Kagai had offered Mantra a jewel, and her rejoiced that her stepson, Ram, the eldest of King Decoded's 4 sons, was going to be made Prince Regent, these thoughts kept bubbling into her mind, the wavering mind. And it kept saying, actually, your son, Bharat, who represents the body, is no longer going to be the master or the king of this empire. And going to do about it. Now, in the story of the Ramayana, Mantra talks to Kakai, and she reminds her of the two boons which King Decoded had offered her during a battle which she had assisted him in fighting the demons in the Dandaka forest. Now, that story within the Ramayana is actually a story which refers to the astral science of how and why your astral body becomes or comes into a physical body. We're not going to talk about that today, but I do explore that within the book. And the reason why we find it very difficult to come out of this stress response, which is activated by the sympathetic system, or known as Kikai, is because we become addicted to these chemicals. So, for example, there's research out there which shows that gossiping actually creates the same experience within your brain, the same chemicals that you were to get if you were to take cocaine. You have this massive surge in these neurochemicals which make you feel good, which is the reason why Facebook is so popular, because what people do is they speak their mind on Facebook. It makes them feel good. And then later on they discover that actually most of the times it's probably not something that they should have done or said. And we're all blaming. We can all blame ourselves, but we're all guilty of doing that at some point. So the long-term effect of stress is disease. Your thoughts can literally make you sick. And therefore, if your thoughts can make you sick, your thoughts can also make you feel better. But that's the difficult part. That is the part where you have to practice these techniques and practice certain techniques, not always advanced yogic techniques, but certain techniques which can help you expand your consciousness and help you start taking more control of your mind and your decision-making process than it being something that's happening from a subconscious level or from the level of mantra, the wavering mind. So Kushal, Decoded, he dies eventually because he has to send Rama into exile. Ram, representing the soul, is now lost within the jungle of the nervous system. The soul is your consciousness, which is locked within the nervous system, which looks like an upturned tree, like a jungle, with his peripheral nervous system, the spine with its nerves and its afferent and efferent nerve endings representing the leaves. We're taking in information from the outside world, which represents 0.04% of what's actually happening in reality. Those electrical signals are going into your body, through your nervous system, through your spine, as an electrical charge and being converted to chemical reactions in your brain. And then your brain, within this darkened skull, is then making decisions for you, is creating your reality. So let's look at have a look at some figures in terms of the practical application of what's actually happening within your mind. So what's happening with Kikai, with mantra, with the body, with Parid, with the soul, Rama, soul consciousness, and what's actually going on. So I've mentioned that your neocortex is around 40% of the brain, so it's a very large part of the brain. Your analytical mind is actually the bridge between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. But your subconscious mind is much, much more powerful than your conscious mind. You actually make most of your decisions throughout your 24 hours subconsciously, because you've trained your body so perfectly that actually your body can now do it better than you can. So Bharat can now do it better than you can. You're no longer in control. Simply by your thoughts alone, you can switch the stress response on, which we just discussed. It's scientifically proven that hormones of stress can downregulate genes and create disease. So not everybody is born to have a genetic code which will express that they have type 2 diabetes, but our environment and our thought and the decisions which we make at a subconscious level have a big part to play in which genes become expressed, and as a result, disease happens. And stress causes disease. What happens now is that you ultimately use your free will to a program which you have created within your brain. Your brain has neurons. When your neurons keep firing the same signals, they start creating these programs, and these programs then become hardwired into your brain and can be very difficult to get rid of, just like a virus in a computer. Around about 70%, 75% of 3/4 of the global population live in the past, because the body, Bharat, is more powerful than the consciousness, Rama. 70% of the body and the mind is cosmic. Okay, so let's explore that. So I've said that the vast majority of people live in the past, and they live in the past because their negative emotions or even their positive emotions are all locked within their connective tissues. Now, say for example, if you think about an experience that you had, a negative experience, perhaps 10, 20, 30 years ago, and you can remember a particular smell or a sound or a piece of music that's related to that incidence of that event. As soon as your senses pick up on those same smells, those same sounds, those same music, those same people, you instantly can recall most of the information in the way you were feeling at that point in time. But that time does not exist anymore. For your body, that exists. Your body is living in the past. From the Vedic science point of view, it is said that the three queens also represent the three guns. The three guns are the three charges. Kakai represents cosmic, so the negative charge. Kushalya represents sattvic, the positive charge. And Sumitra represents the neutral charge. On the surface of your body and your mind, Kakai, the negative charge, and Sumitra, the neutral charge, are the most predominant. And Sumitra, being the neutral charge, she will only favor that queen or that charge or gun that is most powerful. Bharat represents the body. Bharat is the son of Kakai. Kakai is Tasmic, the negative charge. She represents the greatest charge on your body and your mind, the negative charge. This is the reason why the vast majority of people live in the survival mode their whole entire life, particularly from about the age of 30 to 35, in that range, because by then, 95% of who you are is a series of memorized behaviors, emotions, reactions, unconscious habits that are hardwired, and beliefs and perceptions that function like a computer program. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they'd like to say? Any comments before I move on? Okay, I'll take that as a no and move on. So a little bit more around the practicalities of what this means for you as an individual. Your thoughts play a critical role in your destiny. Because if your thoughts can make you sick, and therefore your thoughts can also make you feel better, depending on the power of your concentration, which we'll have a look at in the next couple of slides. But every single day you have 60 to 70 thoughts every day. But 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that you had the day before. They're the same thoughts that you had last week. Possibly even the same thoughts, or the vast majority of those thoughts over the last 10, 15, 20 plus years. Now, when you keep having the same thoughts every day, and they're negative thoughts and survival mode thoughts, you're going to continually get the same result as a result of your thoughts. Nerves that fire together, wire together. These nerves create these programs in your brain, which can be very difficult to get rid of. This hardwire then becomes your destiny. Your habits is like a computer program. You can't break free from it unless you use another program to get rid of it, which is Kriya Yoga. So ultimately then what happens is that if you're having the same thoughts, you're making the same choices. If you're making the same choices, you've got the same actions and behaviors, same experiences as a result. Same experiences will lead to the same feelings and emotions, and same emotions and feelings and result in the same results. It's a vicious cycle because then you're going to go back to the same thoughts. You have to break that cycle. You have to break that karmic cycle that you have created within yourself. Your personality creates your personal reality, and your body is a collection of these emotions trapped in your connective tissues. And the body cannot distinguish between the past and an emotion. Your bharat is now more powerful. Your bharat is the king of your kingdom, not Rama consciousness, which is lost within the jungle of the nervous system as a result of Decoded being activated. So let's look at the spiritual interpretation then. Let's look at how we can start reversing this flow. But first, before we do that, let's understand the environment that we're working within. So your body and your mind in the Mahabharata, Ved Vyas described this as dharma kshetra, kurukshetra. And dharma kshetra, kurukshetra represents the body and the mind. Now, there's this common misconception that we only use around 5-10% of our brain, which is actually wrong. We use all of our brain, but we only use around 5 to 10% of our consciousness. Your conscious mind, your Rama consciousness is only 5%, is battling against 70,000 thoughts, negative thoughts, every single day. Bharat is now a bundle of negative emotions and desires, and Decoded, representing the sympathetic system, the survival mode, is consistently in survival mode. So what do? You have to increase your consciousness, your Rama consciousness, develop a strong power of concentration and focus. And this happens with the power of volition, the power of willpower. Willpower is not just some sort of mythological energy that is spoken of within the Vedas. It's actually something very real. It is the dynamo which helps you achieve what you want to achieve, materially or spiritually. And there is mechanical will, and there is conscious will. And this will can be something that you can practice through a technique of pranayama, hatha yoga techniques, in which you practice willpower and how you manipulate those energies within the body. We can talk about that in a separate presentation because it requires a whole different discussion, but it is something which is taught within the Ramayana Decoded lessons. Does anybody have any questions? Any comments? Okay, I'll move on. So I wanted to put this in here. It shows Paramahansa Yogananda here, who is the father of Kriya Yoga in the West. He was the one that brought this sacred science from India into the Western world. But there were some questions asked from some of the followers around how these can be used in the practical application in terms of developing career or business or within your education or even just within life. Now, there's a lot of very famous people out there who claim to have read Paramahansa Yogananda's books, and that has been a source of inspiration for them. Certainly for people like Steve Jobs and George Harrison from the Beatles, this was something that it's something that they promoted quite regularly throughout their careers. Certainly Steve Jobs was one of the last things that he left for his employees and colleagues at Apple was Paramahansa Yogananda's book as a gift. Now, it's important to realize that most of us will make decisions in tragedy before we make any kind of change. However, you can make positive change in a state of happiness and joy, and you can make positive change in a state of pain and suffering. The choice is yours. If you want to wait for that one major event, which is going to, perhaps put you on a different path, then so be it. But the vast majority of people actually don't even make a huge change when something of great significance happens to them. There's a very small percentage of people. Then there's this whole concept about positive affirmations. People use positive affirmations, and they have this belief that through positive affirmations that something in their life is going to change, that they're trying to achieve. But if that was the case, then why is it that the vast majority of people who do have positive affirmations and do recite them on a daily basis, day and night, are still not making any progress? What I want to explore is this whole concept about the universe. The universe does not care about your personal financial goals. However, Maya does. Maya consists of time, space, the atom, and the sound of prana or om. The universe is vast. You have to understand the purpose of life, the purpose of the universe, and what is the meaning of dharma. This red dot over here represents the Milky Way cluster. The Milky Way has 100 billion stars or masses of energy in this red dot. You have 100 billion neurons in your brain. This is the whole entire universe here. The vast universe, we're not even exploring the multiverses here, or parallel universes here. So don't think that the universe really cares about personal financial goals or about your personal desires, feelings, and likes. However, Maya does. But God, the universe, has given you this power of willpower and of reasoning. And your power of will and reasoning can be used in a positive way or a negative way for you to achieve what you want to achieve. That is what you can use. And when you do use that, you break this cycle of thoughts, of negative thoughts. You break this cycle of karma, and it takes your life in a different direction. To be able to understand this concept, you have to understand what dharma means, what dharma really means. And that's something that we have explored in previous webinars and presentations, but I'm quite happy to kind of explore that again. But it's definitely something that we look at within the Kriya Yoga lessons that we have through Ramayana Decoded. So it's about breaking the cycle of karma, that everyone has the same 24 hours, no matter who you are. We all have the same access to Maya. You must break the fight and flight primitive response of the guy who's consistently putting you into the survival mode and giving Bharat the keys to the kingdom, and Ram, the consciousness, is now lost in the jungle of the nervous system. In order to do that, you must destroy the ego. But when I say ego, I don't mean ego in the way that you might be thinking. Ego is represented by Ravana, sitting at the bottom of the spine. Remember I said that the bottom of the spine represents these wavering thoughts. The bottom of the spine, its function is basic survival. It's about paying your bills, it's about survival, it's that basic instinct. However, in your brain, and we will explore this further in later webinars, is about this default mode, which actually makes your mind or your brain very narrow-minded, and it does that for a purpose. It does it because it needs human life to survive, for there to be continuation. So it's almost like a blinkers are put around your eyes if you can't see anything beyond what you're focusing on. And prosperity and happiness is a state of mind. And this whole concept of Ikai, Bharat, Rama consciousness, mantra, all play a big role in your destiny and your karma. But you must also remember that prosperity and happiness is also a state of mind. It's Lakshmi. So I've come across some people that say to me, I've got Lakshmi Yoga in my Lagna chart, in my birth astrology chart. That doesn't mean that you're going to become the next multi-millionaire or billionaire. What that means is that you'll be given enough, and you have to be content and happy as per your karma to live within that. If you have everything that you need to get through life, and also have the opportunity to practice spirituality, then you have a successful life. Immense riches, it's definitely defined by Kubera, who was the stepbrother of Ravan, who Ravan stole the golden Lanka from, where he held captive Rama's wife, Sita. So to understand your life purpose, and I touched upon this in the previous slide, it's all about dharma, understanding what your dharma is. And there are some people who have alluded to it, perhaps unconsciously, and people like Earl Nightingale, who have said that if you are able to give people everything that they need, then you can have everything that you want. The key part there is in knowing how to commercialize it from a business point of view. For example, taking the ecosystem of Apple, you're giving something that everybody needs because they need to be able to communicate with their relatives all over the world quickly and cheaply. But it's a case of how do you commercialize that, which is why Apple has been very, very successful financially. Now, success is the progressive realization of a worldly ideal, and I don't want you to walk away thinking that actually success is something that always has to be related to luxuries or possessing luxuries. There's nothing wrong with possessing luxuries, but there is something wrong with being possessed by possessions. That is wrong. Now, this is all possible through the science of Kriya Yoga, which is why you saw some of these very famous people who practiced Kriya Yoga and were also very successful. One of the kind of most modern examples is Steve Jobs. But it's not just me that he's banging on about this. From an astrology point of view, or Vedic science point of view, what I'm going to show you is a video by Kapil Raj from KRS channel. And he says, from an astrological point of view, basically more or less what I'm saying. So I'm going to show that to you in the next slide.
Not gemstones, okay? Not some yantra, a plate that you can buy for $500, or gemstones you can buy for $2,000, $3,000. No, this is where the simple divine steps in. And this is where the real divine stepped in and has stepped in for over and over again, but now he's really stepping in, which is who? Maha-Avatar Babaji, Gorakshar Babaji, who's the enlightened embodiment, the light embodiment of either Shiva, some say it's a light embodiment of Krishna, who lives in the Himalayas for thousands and thousands of years now. And he's the one who gave the message of Kriya Yoga. Through the breath of the Kriya, you will burn away all the sins from the past lives. And if you want to live that pure life on the 7th loka, not the 3rd loka that you're in, but the 7th loka, the highest of the one, you can do that. I'll give you the cheat code. Start doing Kriya Yoga. Not gemstone.
And there you have it. Start doing Kriya Yoga if that is what you want to achieve, either materially or spiritually. And Ramayana Decoded have created a number of courses. One of them is available through Think Tree Hub. The details are over here. You can become a member of Think Tree Hub. I am a subject matter expert for Think Tree Hub with accredited courses in Kriya Yoga. But these courses, it's not just about practicing techniques of Kriya Yoga, but also discovering your life purpose. It's about various different things, that you would find. I have qualifications in NLP, so I'm a neuro-linguistic practitioner. I can help with that also, but also with the spiritual techniques, as well as understanding the science of these Vedas from a spiritual science point of view. So that's the end of my presentation, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to send me questions in. We are on Facebook, on Instagram, we have a WhatsApp group, and you can email me or you can send me a message or join up through Think Tree Hub. We also have a QR code over here that you can scan and start following us and following our content. So the next one that we're going to do will be in a couple of weeks, and I will send out the details for the next webinar. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today, and we will meet again in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much for your time.